the Starfleet life with the USS Dauntless. Are you brave enough to be a Starfleet officer? Do you have what it takes?
Greetings. I'm Admiral Swart, Commanding Officer of the USS Dauntless, and this is the briefing with the Admiral for stardate -250352.1. I am the Admiral in question, and today we're going to be talking about the love of Star Trek. But before we get to that, let's do the housekeeping. We record these sessions every Tuesday at 12:30 p.m. South African Standard Time. If you are an active duty member of the Dauntless crew, you're welcome to join us live in Discord in the Screening Room channel, so you can participate in the chat, you can ask me questions, and you can log mission attendance. Everyone else is welcome to join us live on YouTube. I'll do my best to monitor the YouTube chat if I'm able to. If you're not able to join us at this time, which is admittedly an awkward time, you're welcome to watch the video after the fact, either on YouTube or on Facebook, where it will be uploaded. If you're, again, a member of the Dauntless crew, an active duty crew member, you are welcome to drop a message in the chat. Please just remember to @tag me so that I can see it. We'll get to the questions at the end of the presentation, but I'll need to scroll up through the active and lively conversations, not everything of which will be addressed to me. So I want to make sure that I see the comments and questions that are aimed at me so that I can find them at the time. So please remember to @tag me so they're highlighted in orange for me when the time comes. Everybody else, you're welcome to participate in the chat live, or if you are watching after the fact, please feel free to drop a comment or a question. I'll do my best to address your question then and there, or I might use it as inspiration for a future video. You can send me private messages if you don't feel like commenting on the public video. That's fine too. You can reach me just about anywhere. Who are we? Well, the Dauntless is a future-focused action and advocacy group that is, at its core, a Star Trek fan club. The Dauntless, the USS Dauntless, is a chapter of Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Association Incorporated, which is the world's largest organized fan group, collective institution. And SFI, Starfleet International, SFI uses the metaphor of starships to organize its chapters, of which the USS Dauntless is one. We are the chapter based in Cape Town, South Africa. It's not an actual starship, obviously. Instead, it's a community of like-minded people who promote Star Trek both as a form of entertainment and as a vision for the future, while taking action towards that future. The ship isn't a ship at all, it's the crew. Dauntless's mission is to promote the values and philosophy of Star Trek, to provide a space for fans to connect and to engage in activities that promote those values. Purpose of today's briefing is the third in a series of the core values of a Starfleet officer, and that is the love of Star Trek. In the last two videos, we've covered the other two core values, which are courage and dedication, and the love of Star Trek is as much a core value as those. Now, I might have said this before, but I think it's worth repeating at this point in the series. I've defined these three core values, courage, dedication, and the love of Star Trek, as being exactly that, core values of what it means to be a Starfleet officer. But I've also addressed at various other occasions a list of other values of Star Trek, of being a Starfleet officer. And I want to make sure I clarify why they're different. Things like commitment to the truth, things like my word is my bond, that kind of thing. Those are all also values of being a Starfleet officer. But these three core ones, courage, dedication, and the love of Star Trek, I think are the most important because they are the values from which all others are derived. Everything else flows out of these three core values. And if we have these three in place, the others will naturally follow. So the others are important and they're worth paying attention to, but I think these are the heart, the rock heart of what it means to be a Starfleet officer. So the third of these core values is the love of Star Trek. Now, what do I mean by love of Star Trek? I want to be clear that I don't just mean that we like Star Trek. Lots and lots of people like Star Trek. Most people are not Starfleet officers. Most people who like Star Trek are not Starfleet officers. Why? Because we don't just like Star Trek, we love it. I'm not going to sting that stupid song that just popped into my head. It's when I say love, I don't just mean that we really, really like it. I mean, some of us do, some of us don't, but that's not the point. The point is that we see value in Star Trek beyond simply its aesthetic appeal and how it makes us feel. We recognize that this is something that is important. And when we love this thing that we think is important, we don't just enjoy it, we don't just like it, we develop a relationship of sorts with the material. And a relationship is something that can, in addition to just being a much deeper bond than just being fond of a thing, a relationship is something that can be built on, that can be grounded, that can be exercised, that can be developed, and can be turned into a foundation for something larger and more meaningful than what we had to begin with. So that's why the love of Star Trek is one of the core values of being a Starfleet officer. We don't just like Star Trek, we don't just think it's cool, we think it's important, and we do our best to develop a relationship with that body of work, with that material. Because it's the reason we do that, reason it's important is because Star Trek is what has brought us together as a group, right? It's our interest in Star Trek that has piqued our interest in being a Starfleet officer, but it is our love of Star Trek that has encouraged and motivated us, inspired us to become part of this movement, part of this institution that is interested not only in sharing our mutual interest in Star Trek, but in taking action towards the optimistic future described in it. For those who might not be aware, and if you're not, why are you here? But it's fine. We'll just do a quick recap. Star Trek is a franchise of mostly television series, as well as to date 14 feature films, created by originally Gene Roddenberry back in 1966. There have been multiple different series, ongoing series, even still today. And again, multiple feature films, all set in the same fictional universe. And they depict, among other things, an optimistic future of what our future could look like if we do things right. If things turn out the way that we hope they would turn out, if humans advance in certain cultural, economic, technological, scientific ways, we could end up in a future that looks in every way that matters like this idyllic Star Trek future, in which all of the major problems that we face today have been largely, if not entirely, eradicated, at least on Earth, if not throughout the galaxy. And what problems? I mean, like crime, poverty, disease, war, all of those things are basically gone. And this has been achieved through human ingenuity, through human dedication and courage, and in my estimation at least, the love of Star Trek. It's through the vision of people like us that world can become a reality. So that's why it's important, I think, that we can reach this world, this future, this idyllic paradise, this utopia that Gene Roddenberry envisioned, through embracing the vision that he gave us, and by helping to steer our future and the future of the people around us towards that wonderful place in which the words "let me help" are the three most important words anybody can say. And it's from this connection to that idyllic future, to that vision of the future, that we harness our courage and our dedication towards developing and moving towards that future. But part of that is also in coming to understand and to embrace fully the material itself, the original, the canon, as we call it. And what is the canon? So we've talked about this extensively too, but the Star Trek canon, why is it called canon? This is a term that we borrow from people who study literature. The canon is a distinct body of work that relates to a specific subject. In this case, the Star Trek canon consists of all of the live action series. So that's Star Trek, the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, and this soon to be released Star Trek Starfleet Academy, as well as the animated series that is the original animated series, Prodigy, and Lower Decks. So those are the series, and then of course there is the series of shorts, the Star Trek short treks, and the 14 feature films, which I won't list off now. That is the canon in a nutshell. There is a lot of secondary material, which is material about the canon. So lots of books that have been written about the philosophy and history and science and astrophysics and linguistics of the Star Trek universe. That is all describing things that happen in the canon. It's interpreting things that happen in the canon. There's things like technical manuals and art books and that kind of thing. Then there's tertiary material, or apocrypha sometimes it's called, which is work that is not canon. So this is things like novels, comic books, games, and then beyond that is unlicensed works. So this is fan fiction, film productions, that kind of thing. There's tons of that in the world, plenty to enjoy and to indulge in. So you've got, think of it in terms of concentric circles. We've got canon in the middle, we've got the secondary sources, then we've got the apocrypha, the non-canon sources, and then we've got fan fiction. And it behooves us to study that whole body of work, placing particular emphasis on the canon itself, using the secondary sources to help us to understand and to process the canon, because sometimes it's a little bit difficult to do so. And then we can fill in any gaps with inspiration from the non-canon and even fan fiction work from time to time. But studying the canon, I think, is the single most important thing we can do to develop our relationship with Star Trek. And that's why we, on the Dauntless, have two different programs that we think help to foster that way of doing things. The first is watch parties. So whenever a new episode of Star Trek is released, which is not as we speak, it's not happening this week. The next release date is a couple of months away. But when there are new episodes being released, typically there's one new episode released a week, and we will gather together on that Friday night and we'll watch that episode together. And we'll classify that as a priority 2 mission. We have 3 different levels of priority. Priority 1 is the most important missions that we have, usually blood donation missions, where there is life or death consequences. These are missions that are crucial and mission critical to what we do here on the Dauntless. Priority 2 missions are missions that everyone is expected to attend, but it's not mandatory, but you are expected to attend. Priority 3 are missions that are of lesser importance. Everyone's encouraged to attend, but it's fine if you can't make it. If there's a new episode that's released on streaming, then we will gather together on that Friday night and we will watch that episode together. If there's a new feature film released in theaters, which hasn't been the case since 2016, so it's been a long time since that happened. Even the most recent feature film, which came out a couple of months ago, Star Trek Section 31, was released on streaming. So we did a priority 2 mission for that one. But if and when another Star Trek feature film is released in theaters, that will then be a priority 1 mission again. Excuse me, because that is then a mission, a critical mission for the broader mission of the USS Dauntless, is to show up in public in uniform and watch that film together. That's years away probably, so there's no rush about that one. But priority 2 missions is typically how we engage in these. So with the watch parties on Friday nights, we gather together here in Discord and we watch the episode together, and we have a conversation about what we're watching in the chat and share that experience together. This is very important in 2 ways. One, it makes sure that everybody on the Dauntless has an opportunity to see that episode. I'm not going to say how we do it, but we make sure that everybody on board gets to see that episode free of charge. You just have to be an active duty member of the crew, and you can watch it. It's also important that we share the experience contemporarily, so that we can communicate with it in real time. We can process it, digest it, discuss it in real time as a community. So both of those things are very, very important. Everybody gets access to it and we get to discuss it. What a lot of us will do typically is we'll watch the episode privately beforehand, so we can just absorb it with no distractions. And then when we have the watch party, that's our second watch through. That's how I do it. And a lot of the other crew members do that as well. And that seems to work well for me, so that I have the mental bandwidth available to engage in the conversation about it, having already gone through the episode once. I find that to be a satisfactory way of doing it. The other program is, strictly speaking, not a Dauntless program. It's a personal project of mine that I make available to the Dauntless, and that is the Daily Devotional Project. I did a briefing video about this not that long ago, so you can go through that in detail if you like. But essentially, it is that I have developed a schedule where we watch through the entire Star Trek canon, all 900 and something episodes, in chronological in-universe sequence, one episode a day until it is done, and then go back to the beginning again and watch through. So every day there is an episode of the day. I have set up an automation so that it posts in a dedicated channel here in the Dauntless Discord what today's episode is, but there's also a spreadsheet. You can look ahead if you want to see what episodes are coming. It's not a secret. So it posts what today's episode is, and that is intended to act as an anchor for discussion around that episode. So we are all encouraged to watch in our own time that episode of the day so that we can have a discussion about it contemporaneously. It's not mandatory in any way. Nobody's required to participate, but it is strongly encouraged that everybody join us in this study because it gives us an opportunity to absorb Star Trek in its proper chronological context, which, at least in my opinion, is probably the best way to watch Star Trek, especially if you haven't seen all the episodes yet. So some people argue that it's better to watch it in release order. I strongly disagree. Because a lot of the older Star Trek series are now so old that the production value is quite disengaging for new viewers. I think it's much better to watch through it in chronological sequence, because then the viewer gets to see what is unfolding in the universe in not real time, but in the correct sequence of events. They also are not subjected to those old series. Next Generation is now 40 years old at this point, just about. Not subjected to those old series with the old production values. They get to see something that's a little bit newer first, which is Enterprise, and then move on to things like Discovery and Strange New Worlds, which are some of the most recent series, before they then delve back to the original series, which is, of course, from the 1960s, which is quite a culture shock. And you need to already be locked into the content before you dive back all of those decades. So I think that the chronological sequence is the sequence that makes the most sense, which is why I present it in that way. And I think it's quite important that as many people as possible participate in the Daily Devotional Project so that we can share that historical context with each other, that temporal context with each other, as we each study in our own time and in our own space the Star Trek canon. Having that ability to share our notes with each other and our observations with each other in near real time, I think, is very valuable. So I try to make a point of every day when I watch the episode, I'll post a comment in that channel of things that I noticed this time around, or things that I think are notable or worth paying attention to in each episode as we go through them. It's perfectly reasonable because we're doing this in our own time. Not everybody has capacity to watch an episode every day. So if I fall a few days behind, then I'll double up. I'll watch 2 episodes a day until I catch back up again. Sometimes if I have extra capacity, I'll watch ahead a few episodes and then just note down my observations in a Google Doc or something until the time comes, then I can drop it in the channel. But I think that is quite important. Right, so that is the principal study of the Star Trek canon, and also engaging in secondary material, things like non-canon books. I said non-canon, but also non-fiction books about the Star Trek universe are also quite valuable. Some of my favorites include The Metaphysics of Star Trek. It's over there. I can't see the name of the author, but it's there. Trekonomics, The Economics of Star Trek, one of the best nonfiction books about Star Trek I've ever read. It's fantastic. So really, really insightful things that explore not only what is covered in the Star Trek canon, but also how it relates to what's happening in the real world in terms of real philosophy, real science, real economics. And we can then anchor and contextualize that future vision in what we know about the world today, which I think is very valuable. Then there's the engaging with the non-canon works. Now, I don't have a lot of time for non-canon novels and comic books and that kind of thing. I know a lot of people enjoy them, and please enjoy them with my blessing, but the few that I've tried just weren't for me. But what I do often enjoy from that sort of second concentric circle of non-canon works is gaming. I think that Star Trek gaming gives us a real opportunity to engage with the Star Trek content in a way that is quite meaningful. So one needs to bear in mind that the content contained in all of the games is not canon, although sometimes objects that are introduced into non-canon works do find their way into canon. Star Trek Online has had many of the ships that were designed specifically for the game have worked their way into canon, especially in Star Trek Picard. So that's cool. But it's not, until it appears on screen, it's not canon. And so Star Trek Online is probably the most complex Star Trek game. In fact, inarguably the most complex Star Trek game that exists. It's a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, free to play, in which you embody a character from Star Trek. You fly around your starship, and it's very deep lore. The storytelling is delightful, and the interface is very satisfying as a Star Trek enthusiast. And it allows you to engage in the material in a very clever way. What I found the writers of Star Trek Online do is they do a great job of linking disparate storylines in canon together in interesting and thought-provoking ways that can help us in our own processing and understanding of canon. So although their story arcs introduced in Star Trek Online themselves are not canon, the fact that they're linking together parallels and interesting tidbits here or there. I'm not going to go into details because I don't want to reveal spoilers, but I think that those interesting linkages help us to study the canon in an indirect way. We just need to be careful about remembering which aspects of it are canon and which aspects are not. And Star Trek Online, I think, is so important that we have a weekly mission led by Colonel Hubert here again in the Dauntless. Active duty crew members are welcome to join, and we will log into Star Trek Online and play together for a couple of hours every Wednesday night, doing task force operations or various other activities, whatever is up in the game at the time. Other games I think also matter. There are other virtual games. There's Star Trek Fleet Command is relatively popular. I think it's a mobile game. I think that's what we call it. It also has multiplayer capabilities, but it's mostly a solo game. We've tried to get a group going for the Dauntless in Star Trek Fleet Command once or twice, but we found that the server architecture of how they set up their virtual world makes it quite difficult for us to port a real life community into the game. You kind of have to have a community built up from only players in the game. So unfortunately, it's been quite difficult for us to establish a Dauntless presence there in any kind of meaningful sense, but some of our members will play the game from time to time. There's another similar game, Star Trek Timelines, that still exists. Every few years they'll release interesting console games. The most recent one I think was Star Trek Resurgence, which was kind of a role-playing game for console and PC. So there are a lot of digital Star Trek games out there that are fairly well supported, very good games, and typically a lot of fun. The other version of Star Trek gaming that I think, in my opinion, is actually more important, at least in some ways, is tabletop Star Trek gaming. And the reason I think that's important, what do I mean by tabletop games? So this is games that involve physical artifacts that exist on a table. So board games, card games, collectible miniature games, that kind of thing. And I think that they are more valuable from a human experiential point of view because they allow you to physically touch an object, a physical artifact that relates to the Star Trek universe. And as we learned in Star Trek First Contact, touching an object connects you to it in a way that is unparalleled in human experience. And having those physical objects, whether it's just a trading card or a miniature starship or a little miniature character, something like that, just having physical contact with that object, I think connects you to it in a very real way. And so I think that tabletop games, things like Star Trek Online, Star Trek Attack Wing, Star Trek HeroClix, Star Trek editions of your favorite board games. I've got one of Settlers of Catan on the shelf over there. I think that physical connection to those Star Trek objects deepens your connection to the material in a very real way. Again, you're still playing non-canon stuff. You're playing a game that doesn't really reflect what's happening in Star Trek canon, although some of the best games allow you to mimic canon in the most interesting ways. I think that's one of the ways that Star Trek CCG Second Edition is so well thought out, is it helps you, is it gives you the opportunity to play things out in the way that we see it on screen, but using these physical objects in the world. I think that that's a very important way of engaging with the Star Trek universe, which is why I'm quite enthusiastic about promoting Star Trek CCG Second Edition as a game, as an activity for us to engage in. I'm less sanguine about promoting it as an online game, although it is possible to play Star Trek CCG online using the Lackey TCG virtual tabletop system, it's just not the same. You're not getting that level of engagement with the universe. You're not getting to get your fingers on that physical paper and really drinking in the richness of the lore that's contained in the design of those cards in the same way that you do with physical cards. So it might work for competitive play if that's the kind of thing you're into, but for social play, which is what I'm more interested in, the physical cards just can't be beaten. And fortunately with Star Trek CCG, it's free to download, print and play. You can just go to trekcc.org, build yourself a virtual deck, or just download one of their virtual starters, take it to your local print shop, print it out on nice quality color paper, sleeve it up with some old Magic cards or old Pokemon cards or whatever, and you are ready to play. I did a whole video on Star Trek CCG. I recommend you go and take a look at that as well. And that physical aspect brings me to the next side of Star Trek engaging with the Star Trek universe, and that is collectibles. Now, this one's somewhat controversial because, especially in South Africa, Star Trek collectibles are both difficult to come by and frightfully expensive. What do I mean by collectibles? I mean just about any physical object you can go into a hobby store and pick up. So whether it's a model starship or an action figure or a life-size prop or even sort of uniform accessories. These things are quite difficult to come across in South Africa because not a lot of people import those things for us. And when they do arrive, they are frightfully expensive. It's quite difficult to afford that kind of thing. What a lot of locals have resorted to doing is to manufacture their own collectibles, 3D printing their comm badges and tricorders and phasers and that kind of thing. I have a few of those in my cabinet over there. And they're great. I treasure those objects. And the official sanctioned ones that I have in there too, I treasure them as well, even though they were expensive. I want to make clear that it's not about how much money that you spend on these objects. It's about having the objects in your home, in your presence, being able to hold them and physically allow that physical touch with the object to connect you to the material that it comes from. Holding that toy phaser in your hand, although it seems silly, it really does conjure up images of what it would be like to be a fictional Starfleet officer in the fictional Starfleet. We, of course, are the real Starfleet officers in the real Starfleet. But it connects you to that material, to those fictional characters that we draw inspiration from in a way that just can't be emulated by simply looking at things on a screen. Looking at things on a screen is important. That's most of what being a lover of Star Trek is. But that physical touch is an extra added dimension that we as humans, as owners of human nervous systems, we really need that. So having an assortment of collectibles in your home that allow you to physically connect to the Star Trek universe is quite important. You don't need to spend a lot of money to do that, but having some money to spend is not the worst thing. And then, of course, there's the aspect of it, which is what we actively provide here in the Dauntless, at least for our crew. And we also facilitate this for non-crew members, and that is community engagement. So this is what relates to our mission, the mission of the Dauntless, which is to promote Star Trek to Africa and the Middle East, to the people around us, to the general public. And creating a community allows people an opportunity to gather together, to share their resources, to share their thoughts, share their enthusiasm, whether that is memes or selling collectibles or just complaining about whatever new episode that was released that they didn't particularly enjoy. Although I don't really condone that kind of activity, I do think that it's valuable to have a space to do that. As Star Trek fans, we need to have that kind of a community where it's safe to do that. We don't want to be moaning to people out in general on the internet, on X or Facebook, about this week's episode and how terrible it was. If we're not satisfied with aspects of this week's episode of Star Trek, we really need to be bringing that conversation to other people within the community so that we can have a thoughtful and informed and insightful conversation about it. And maybe you'll change other people's minds. Maybe someone else will change your mind. But that's only going to happen within the context of a dedicated community. And that's what we create here within the Dauntless for our members. And we also facilitate this with the community outreach project, where we have a Facebook group, Star Trek South Africa. We also have now extended that to a Discord server, which is open to the general public, the Star Trek South Africa Discord server, where just general Star Trek fans who are civilians or Starfleet officers alike can gather and enjoy each other's company in that community space. I think that there's value. That also, if we are able to build up that community sufficiently, that also then becomes a recruiting pool where members of the public, civilians who are interested in Star Trek, who want that kind of community, can then perhaps be exposed to some of the material that we on the Dauntless produce. And I'm pretty sure this video will be posted there. And perhaps they will be inspired to take a step up and adopt the Starfleet life, to start living the values of what it means to be a Starfleet officer. All right, okay. That is everything that I needed to cover. Let's go through and see what comments or questions might have been dropped. Is there anything there? Let's see. From Commander Shimali, Metaphysics of Star Trek was written by Richard Hanley. Thank you. Yes, Richard Hanley. It's a fantastic read. I'd strongly recommend it. And he's from Zambia. I didn't know that. That is interesting. Okay, that was the only comment directed at me. I just want to say thank you to everybody who has joined me here from the crew. We've got Captain von Krunen, we've got Commander Shimali, Master Chief Newton, Colonel Yubert, and Master Chief Kotza. Thank you everybody for joining us here today. Without any further comments or questions, I think we can call this one. This has been a relatively brief one. The love of Star Trek, you would think, would be a no-brainer and an obvious prerequisite for somebody choosing to live the Starfleet life. But I don't fully agree, because, as I mentioned, I think that the relationship with Star Trek is something that you can build on and develop and strengthen over time. So you need to have an appreciation for it, or else why are you here? But building that relationship with Star Trek, I think that is a core Starfleet value that we can use to inform and empower and grow our dedication and our devotion to the various other Starfleet values, including courage and dedication, because it's through Star Trek, through observing the characters that we have chosen to emulate, that we can see how important it is to demonstrate things like courage and dedication. It's our love of Star Trek that opens that window so that we can step through into our own journeys of self-improvement and our own careers as Starfleet officers. All right, so loving Star Trek means embracing the future with curiosity, courage, and dedication. Let that love guide your actions, not just your imagination. In every choice you make, be the kind of person the future is counting on. Thank you. That is all for today. You are dismissed. Swart out.